The February 25th electoral cycle translates into 24 years of uninterrupted electoral cycle, the longest in the history of Nigeria. It came with lots of optimism and expectation. In my own opinion, I would like to say that this election was the most anticipated election in the history of Nigeria. It came with lots of optimism amongst local and international observers that this election would come with more improvements than others.
Hello everyone, my name is Emmanuel and I want to share my thoughts on what I feel about the Nigerian February 25th, 2023 presidential election. It is a critical time for our nation and these are the issues that needs our attention. Firstly, most of the contestants in the elections are too old. We have contenders who are 70 and 72 years old respectively.
Hello, good day. My name is Dennis Ezechukwu Godwin. Now, following the outcome of the election, I would say that Nigeria still have a very long way to go in election matters.
To be sincere with ourselves, February 25th every year supposed to be anniversary for this Nigeria. Every Nigerian knows say na February 25th, 2023, na him our big men for this country carry their lie, deceit and open thief, take so smelly clothes, wear am without shame. They waka for our country reach today.
Today, I'm going to share my thought with you about the Nigerian 25th February 2023 presidential election. The former president of Nigeria, General Muhammadu Buhari, and the National INEC chairman promised us Nigerians a good, incredible, transparent, free and fair election, which turned out to be our worst nightmare.
I'll be exploring the three prominent candidates, Mr. Peter Gregory Obi, Obedient of the Labour Party, Bola Ahmed Asiwaju Tinubu, Batified of the All Progressive Congress, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, Articulated of the People's Democratic Party.
So what's an election? An election is a formal process where people choose individuals to hold public offices or decide on specific issues. And we're not going to be looking at the aspect of deciding on specific issues, you're making decision. I'm going to be looking at the aspect of choosing individuals to hold public offices. Not talk about election. Eligible citizens, I'm not Nigeria, citizens from 18 years and above are the ones that are eligible to vote their representative.
It was an election that was so greatly anticipated by an average Nigerian with so much energy and hope that it's going to be the only vital avenue for salvaging the situation of the nation.
Our president, they say there is nothing I can do. So there is nothing I can say. Carry on. If I be close my eyes, myself for Canada, I can collect more. I come back. This country knows.
Two things were unprecedented about the 2023 general elections. First was the stout political rallies held by Nigerians across Nigeria even before electioneering campaigns kicked off. Second was the use of beavers. Nigerians were given repeated assurances that beavers would not falter, that beavers would work. Unfortunately, all these were rendered completely useless when the electoral body intentionally refused or failed to transmit results online.
This is the first DDM video competition. No glitches, no court cases, and
Okay, thank you very much and welcome back. These are our contestants on this DDM contest. Please, I'll advise you to go to the YouTube and vote them, and let's have a winner by this evening. We're going to have a winner. The topic we're looking at today is the judiciary. The topic said the judiciary, a defector, electorate umpire. So looking at defector, I have to check because I'm not a learned colleague. I have to check my dictionary. I find out a defector is a person that abandoned his cause or country in favor of opposing one. So this topic is very crucial. Looking at the presidential election 2023, we're going to have two guests. One, Mr. Obum is a learned colleague from UK, and also a learned senior colleague, Emmanuel. So once they come in, we're going to receive them. But before then, we shall be together looking at what happened in 2023. You see, because of what happened, what the judiciary did, there's no light. You can see I'm finding myself, you see, and everywhere is lousy, noisy, cost of things are going up. But let's go at it critically. On 25th of February, we had the election, we all knew. And September 6th was the judgment day. The judiciary, the tribunal gave their judgment in favor of President Tinubu, who is the current president of Nigeria. And then on October 26th, being Thursday, the Supreme Court upheld the judgment. Hello?
Especially at the presidential election was very...
Go ahead, sir. Okay, so on October 26th, the Supreme Court upheld the very judgment that the tribunal gave. So, and today we are going to look at how the judiciary has really gone their way to do what they are not known for. Because I was going through an article and I saw what PDP wrote after the judgment. They said the judgment by the Supreme Court has evidently shaken the confidence of Nigerians in the judiciary, especially the Supreme Court, as the last hope of the common man. PDP
okay, excuse me, Pastor Lawrence, just a moment. I think probably Barrister Emmanuel Ogede might be available, if we can check. I don't know if he's the one with the global concept from US.
Yeah, if it's
yes,
available.
I'm here. I'm available.
Okay, sir. This topic is is your topic, sir, and we would like to welcome you to please talk to us on this topic. The mic is yours, sir.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me on what is undoubtedly a very sad anniversary for Nigeria. In the annals of Nigerian elections, I think the most infamous one was June 12, 1993. And 30 years later, this last election. It was not just a flawed election, it was a fraud election. The equivalent of what the Nigerian judiciary decided and INEC decided was the equivalent of saying that only a 3-story building that was assessed, the first floor and the second floor had foundation, but the third floor did not have foundation. How is that possible? The IREV produced candidates for the National Assembly and the Senate. And then it did not produce a president. How is that possible? How was there a glitch that impacted only the presidential and not the other two? It's like saying that a three-floor or a three-story house, the first two floors have foundation and the third does not have. That is a logical incongruity. It is not possible. Now, I will say this as someone who has observed the election and who also have observed the trials. I came all the way from the US for them. And your topic today is about whether the judiciary is a defector. And I want to ask the alternative question, whether the judiciary is defective. Defective means, an operating error. A defector means somebody who abandoned his responsibility, his constitutional responsibility, and his patriotism. So it was a very interesting question you asked, and that's what we'll be addressing. Was this action of the judiciary mala fide, in other words, in bad faith, or was it an innocent mistake? Now, I want to say that that election and the actions of the courts that followed brought to me a new term. We have the judiciary and we now have the judiciary. Now, judiciary is witchcraft. You don't know how it works. And the funny thing is that I learned this concept from a retired justice of the Supreme Court who lamented that the court is now similar to miracle workers. He told me that he told the pastor that the courts are now like you. They perform miracles. We don't know how it happens. But it is no longer the law that is at play. Let me show you how extremely, illogical what we saw happened. We saw, like I said earlier, that the same elections and the same IREV that produced National Assembly members failed to produce a president. Similarly, in the state elections, the same primaries in Plateau states that produced a governor failed to produce members of the National Assembly. In the same country, it makes no sense. But what is interesting is that when the Plateau matter went up to the Supreme Court, at this point, the Court of Appeal had completely decimated the PDP candidates. When the case came up for the governorship at the Supreme Court asked the lawyers that already, if a mistake has been made at the Court of Appeal and those PDP legislators no longer have an option, why should we at the Supreme Court grant your prayers for the governor? And the counsel for Plateau State, one of the counsel, said, look, the fact that the mistake was done before doesn't mean it should be corrected. It should not be corrected now. We have to start the correction somewhere. And that is why the decision of the Supreme Court in the governorship case of Plateau is different from the decision of the Court of Appeal in Plateau State for National Assembly. So that tells you that if the Supreme Court can clearly say the Court of Appeal was wrong in the case of Plateau, how are we to feel confident about what the Supreme Court did with regard to the presidency? So I have to tell you that the Nigerian judiciary in the last election did not credit itself well. It did not acquit itself most honorably. Now, I can give you another very galling instance of something unheard of in our jurisprudence. We had a situation where a Court of Appeal gave a verdict and nobody could understand the verdict. Both parties were celebrating that they won. When I initially saw it in social media, I thought it was a mistake. And for a day, I did not believe it until a retired justice of the Supreme Court sent it to me. That was when I said, are you serious that the Court of Appeal wrote a judgment and gave victory to both sides in an election governorship case in Kano? And then the court as again, you need to understand that the law tends to be logical and precise, discipline. So some of these things are mind-boggling. Can you believe after they issued the judgment, the court registrar asked the parties that they should bring the judgment back so that they can correct it? No, just think about how deeply destabilizing this is to a system and an institution. If we have to start correcting judgments with TPEX. So the question now arises, if you are requiring them to bring back the Kano governorship judgment to be corrected with TPEX, which other case needs to be recalled for TPEXing? So these are some of the absurdities that were thrown up in the 2023 elections. I will pause there for a minute in case you have any questions before I continue.
Thank you so very much. I've loved to welcome Mr. Rampam, but before he comes in, so many things happened during the judiciary process. First of all, Nigerians lost hope when they said they declared Tinubu winner. I personally met so many people, and we saw some people say going to court is useless. Why are we going to court? And at the end of the day, it was more or less useless. Do you think Nigerians will ever have hope in the judiciary again, based on what happened in this past election? That's presidential election.
So that's a very good question. And I have to tell you that all of the elements for the disqualification of Tinubu as a presidential candidate, virtually all of them existed. The evidence was there, the facts were there. In fact, he was his biggest witness against himself, because the INEC form that he filled out for governorship and the one that he filled out for presidency were both opposites. In other words, he claimed institutions he never attended. So just exhibiting his two affidavits alone would have established him as a liar and as a forger, and he would have been disqualified. So what we saw was a very systematic abuse of the Constitution, abuse of the rule of law, and abuse of any level of human decency or logic. Now, let me tell you this. The court read an 800-page judgment. Now, I had attended a lot of the hearings of the courts. I flew to Nigeria several times, to monitor the trials. And I can tell you, I didn't have enough notice to fly for the judgment, so I decided to watch it. I woke up at 4 a.m. in the US. I started watching this judgment. My children went to school and came back after 6 p.m. and I was still watching judgment. They started pitying me. Can you imagine? They gave a 13-hour judgment, which was one of the longest judgments in the history of the world. In fact, I asked my assistants to research and find out if there's been a longer judgment in the history of the world. And the bottom line is that judgment amounts to what Shakespeare called, a sound of thunder and fury, signifying nothing. At the end of the day, what that judgment did was to perpetuate election mischief and to actually, legitimize criminality. Because there's no two ways about it. There were clear indications that criminal elements had infiltrated the system, and the court shut its eyes to this criminality on the basis of technicalities. So what I'm saying is this: if the election of 2023, if nothing was wrong with that election, then there needs to be no election again in the future. Let INEC just go and announce people at 4 a.m. and let's continue and save the money that was wasted on having elections and on having litigation. because all the objective elements for the annulment of that election existed. At minimum, if there was no annulment, at minimum, the court would have called for a rerun or a by-election. So we have a situation where the courts signally failed the nation of Nigeria. And I don't think that going forward, anybody can have faith in any election in Nigeria. At this point, it is the people who have the money to steal elections, who have the terrorists to bastardize innocent human beings, that will carry the day, because the courts have certainly not shown themselves to be the guardians of the conscience of the nation. And that is truly a tragic phenomenon.
So thank you very much, sir. Moving forward, are you saying that there's no remedy or there's no way to bring back the judiciary to their rightful place so that they will remain focused and do the right thing? Are you saying that 2027 next elections, there's no need going to the court, seeing what happened last year?
No, I think this is the last straw. It is all over. There's no, we literally, the judiciary is no longer the last hope of the common man. It is now the last hope of the desperate con man. We need to understand that, Now, let me say something, because some people have compared the 2007 election with this election. And those are not the same things. In 2007, Yaradua was sued by Buhari, Atiku, and Odumegwu Ojukwu. And I observed that election as well. Let me make something very clear. I knew it was a historic election, and I flew to Nigeria to cover that election as well. And here's what happened. In the case of Odumegwu Ojukwu, his case was thrown out because he had only one witness, who was his secretary. And his secretary came and testified that there was election in some local governments in Plateau State. Were you there? No. There was no way a credible court could give attention to that kind of testimony. And so the case was kicked out. Another case that came up was the case of Buhari. What was fascinating was that Buhari's exhibits were all attested to by a notary public who was his own lawyer. This is an elementary principle of evidence, that your lawyer cannot be the one before whom you swear to an oath. So they went to court, they asked the witness who gave evidence, where did you attest to this your evidence? He said, before a notary public. Who was the notary public? He mentioned the name of the lawyer. He said, well, he's in the court today. Yes, point at him. He pointed at his personal lawyer. That was how all their evidence by affidavit was kicked out, because they did not follow the rules of evidence. So the third case, and the most powerful case, which would really have changed everything, was the case of Atiku. In Atiku's case in 2007, what happened? He made a fundamental mistake. He argued that he was excluded from the election. And then he also argued that, his votes were rigged. Those two arguments are mutually exclusive. If you are excluded, you cannot have rigged votes. Do you know that that was a major lawyering error that cost him that case? Why? Because as at that time, exclusion from an election was fatal. Once you prove that you are excluded from an election, the court will annul it and give you another opportunity to run. But because Atiku's lawyers said he was excluded, then tendered ballot boxes showing his name and votes he got, and saying, his votes were cheated, they annulled each other because they disproved his exclusion. Now, let me point out that in that 2007, honestly, Atiku litigated a lot of things, and the court was very dynamic. He won. Remember that he was battling his boss, Obasanjo, who had indicted him in an effort to unseat him from running. Do you know that Atiku went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ordered that he should be allowed to run, and the election had to be postponed, and the ballot boxes that had already been printed were voided, and they used fresh ballot box for him to contest. So part of the reason why he ultimately lost was the court had done everything they asked him to do, including allowing him run, postponing the election and all of that. But then he did himself in by claiming he was excluded and that his votes were rigged. That is not the situation with this case that happened in 2023. And let me explain why. In the 2023 case, the Court of Appeal said that the affidavits and the exhibits should have been filed along with the petition at the time of the filing of the petition, and that the parties did not do that, so it threw away all of their evidence and their case. But let me make something very clear. The law is clear that a party will file his petition and that the secretary of the tribunal or of the court, election courts, will determine whether his petition is in compliance. And if his petition is not in compliance, the secretary will refuse to file it. What happened? The parties filed their petition, and the secretary of the election tribunal accepted it. That means that she found it to have met the criteria for acceptability. So the court could not come around later and refuse to accept what they submitted because it's official in the person of the court clerk or the court secretary had reviewed it and come to the determination that it was acceptable for filing. You see, our law allows the secretary of the election courts to do the initial review, and the punishment for not complying is that it will not be accepted, not that the case will be thrown out, based on our election law. And so what happened in this case was truly a travesty, because a court decided that non-compliance with court rules was more important than court non-compliance with election rules. And that is an unfortunate message that it has sent to Nigerians.
Yeah, thank you so very much for that elaborate explanation, sir. I would like to bring in Mr. Rampam. Are you there? The national chairman, are you there?
Yes, Pastor
Okay.
Lawrence, I'm right here. I'm right here. I'm enjoying the conversation.
Before you take over, I would like to chip in the 25% of FCT. Maybe you take it off from there, sir.
Look, you see, again, this was another constitutional fraud that occurred. It was a constitutional fraud that occurred. I repeat that. Because the framers of the Constitution were very clear that we needed 25, we needed a percentage of states and the FCT. And the philosophical underpinning was that Abuja is an artificial creation, and people from all over the country are here. So it does not have any dominant composition. It was not like Lagos, where, you know, whether you like it or not, when Lagos was the capital, it was predominantly a Yoruba city. Abuja, till today, most people don't even know the name of the tribe that owns Abuja, the Bagi. Most people don't know the names because they have not been assertive and, you know, loud as Lagosians tend to be. And so in their wisdom, they felt all of the people who live in Abuja are there as indigenes, as citizens of Nigeria without tribal coloration. And they should be given a casting vote, so to say, to recognize their effort in being there. Now, the second constitutional reason why Abuja has that casting vote is Abuja does not have a governor. It's a territory that does not have a governor. So they do not elect, they do not have elected, they do not elect their own governor. Their governor is actually the minister for FCT. And the minister is appointed by the president. And so to give them a sense of belonging in the country so that they do not feel like a colonized people, they said, okay, at least let them be able to decide who the president is, who will give them their minister. So that was the logic behind it. And so for the courts to completely, discountenance the wisdom, the intellect, and the rigorous analysis that produced this item in our constitution, it was truly, truly a travesty.
And some people said they actually killed the constitution. Mr. Umpire, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pastor Lawrence. And Emmanuel Ogede, it's always been nice hearing you. Now, there's this thing, judiciary being the last hope of the people, of the masses, the last place of resort. Coincidentally, constitutionally, it's also like the last bus stop for electoral justice. Is it now an offense that people should have their eyes on the judiciary when the case deciding their president is in the judiciary, with reference to the mantra that went around just before the elections of the government or those in power decided to see them as opposition, all eyes on the judiciary? What's your take on that, sir?
Well, you see, that is the irony of this situation, in the sense that courts are one of the few public institutions that public access is granted to. I mean, you go to any courtroom, there are seats for the public gallery. So it is strange to me that any court will not want its proceedings to be public. It is bizarre that the judiciary recoils at the concept of all eyes on the judiciary. Where did they want our eyes to be? To be on the military? We really have to interrogate what is going on in the mindsets of our people. I was very shocked to read some years ago that a judge said in open courts, and people should be careful the way they criticize the government, that is government that pays their salary. And I said to myself, how pedestrian can this individual be, that as a judge, he doesn't understand the separation of powers? You cannot be reasoning that, oh, they pay your salary, so what? There are constitutional limits and boundaries for each party. So it was very unfortunate that the judiciary felt the need to push back on the all eyes on the judiciary campaign. That tells you that the people are looking to you as their last hope. And for you to say that they can't even look, that means that, you are up to no good. And that's an unfortunate thing. But there's no legal basis for saying that the public has no right to look into the courts and the proceedings.
Yeah, Mr. Rampan, before you continue, we'll give room for people who might have questions or contribution while we continue. Mr. Rampan, over to you, sir.
Oh, very well, very well. The floor is open before we continue with Barrister Emmanuel. The floor is open. If you want to say a word or two, please, you can indicate. And our eyes are open to check, all eyes on the people around. So if you want to do something, please raising up your hand. And while that is going on, I'll just go back quickly to Barrister Emmanuel. From the judgments regarding the presidential elections at the Supreme Court, what is Nigeria's rating? Probably not official, but within the international community, in terms of judicial jurisprudence.
Did you say what is Nigeria's rating?
Yes, as in how do the judiciary in the world view the quality of Nigeria's judges?
You see, it's very unfortunate, but Nigeria already had a terribly poor, favorability rating, so to say, in terms of its judiciary. It was so bad that most international commercial contracts for the past decade or so do not select Nigeria as a venue for trials. They select Europe or any other place than Nigeria. So this was the case even before the election petition. Now, to make matters worse, Atiku went to a US federal court and requested the records of Tinubu for his case. Would you believe it that a US federal judge reviewed the case, wrote a 30-page judgment saying the records should be released? Tinubu basically appealed it within the same court. And another judge was asked to review it. She heard the matter. She realized it was urgent. She did her best. And on a Saturday at midnight, released a 30-page judgment providing this and ordering his records to be released. Now, these two judges did a rapid turnaround on these cases because they realized the importance of producing this valuable evidence to the Nigerian people so that the Nigerian courts could do what was right. And can you imagine how those judges who worked through the weekends must feel to know that their hard work was put to shame by their judicial colleagues in another country who simply basically threw it under the rug. So this is an example of how the nation demeaned itself. But let me give you a further example. In December, in fact, on Christmas Eve, I flew into Nigeria with a client who I had defended at the Indonesian Supreme Court. He was on death row at the time that I came into his case 15 years ago. And when I spoke to the Indonesian ambassador to Nigeria, what can we do about this guy's case? He said, look, the man's case is over. He was convicted at the High Court. He was sentenced to death at the Court of Appeal. And his death sentence was confirmed by the Supreme Court. And the Indonesian ambassador said to me, he said, as a fellow lawyer, I'll give you only one piece of advice. 27 days to his execution, he will be notified. And then you now have a right of appeal with fresh evidence within 27 days. So I got involved. We began collecting evidence around the world. We found out the man was set up. And when he was given notice of his execution date, we submitted our brief. Do you know that after several months, the court called us, we came, we made our presentation, and after a year or so, the court accepted the new evidence that we introduced 27 days to the execution of our client and reversed his death sentence. And we flew him back to Nigeria in December. He's in Nigeria now. How can a foreign court spare the life of a Nigerian on death row, someone who was on death row for many years because of new evidence, and then a Nigerian Supreme Court refused to hear new evidence provided to it by brother justices? That just tells you the state of our judiciary.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Rampan, before you continue, a question just came in. You see, we have countries where we practice all this law and all of you. countries of the world, including America. Why is Nigeria different? What do you think is the problem, and what will be the solution? I think as we begin to round up in a few minutes, since we don't have contributors, that question I think is important, sir. What do you think about that?
You see, we are in trouble in this country. The justice sector is basically finished. It is like playing Kalu Kalu. It's a lottery. You don't know what you get at the end of the day. Now, interestingly, one of my staff was recently called to law school. They told them the resumption date was 29th January, but they didn't tell them which campus it is. How can I resume where I don't know? This is a simple matter as school resumption. You know, we have multiple law school campuses. You are supposed to resume on January 29th unfailingly, but you don't know where to resume at. That is the condition of Nigeria now. That is the condition of our legal system. In fact, I feel that as if the law school should be abolished. Why? What will they teach them in law school? Will they teach them the judgment of the Supreme Court on the Plateau primaries, or the judgment of the Court of Appeal on the Plateau primaries? Because the same facts in the same primaries of the same party are two different results. So what are they going to teach our children? I think that at this point, they should cancel law school. Just go and try your luck. And just let us know that we've turned the legal system into gambling. Because you walk into a court of law and you don't know what to expect.
Mr. Rampam, are you there?
No longer 4, it is 22. So when you say, how do we correct that? You cannot correct that. You simply cannot. We have to have a fresh start, because this current country, as currently constituted, is nothing more than a penal colony. That is why people are trying to run out. Nigeria is a prison. Law enforcement are prison guards. That is why we're suffering every day. In fact, elections should be abolished in Nigeria. Why? Because when you have an election, you come in with somebody new who now makes life hard for you. If there was no election in May, we will still be suffering Buharism. But because there was an election, we're all now suffering Tinuburism. So it would almost have been better for us to continue suffering under Buharism than this one now. You see? So, I'm sorry to say, right now, there is simply no hope. There's simply no hope for Nigeria. We have to restart the country from ground floor. However it is done, whether it's a revolution, whatever, right now, there's no law in this country. This is a lawless country. There's no law.
That's a very strong way of putting it, and it is really, really pathetic for us in Nigeria.
Very pathetic, very serious issue.
We will even be having elections this year. We have local government elections, we have off-circles elections, before even the main elections, Pastor Lawrence. This is.
Sorry, Mr. Rampam, somebody is raising hand so that you take notes.
Oh yeah, please go on.
Yeah, it's very, very enlightening. Your contribution, sir. That's it's sad. The truth is bitter. Everything you said is quite honest, and it's a sad state that we are in today. And I do agree with you. Nigeria needs a reset, because how can you expect this level of criminality to bring about change? We open and praying for an impossibility. And you expect this same man that stole, somebody that did not campaign at all, that has now been selected. So actually, you cannot hold him responsible for anything, because he never made any promises. When he wasn't in power, he was able to steal the election. Now he's in control of the entire system. and we're looking forward to a fair election. So reality, we need to think and see the way forward. Thank you very much, sir, for your contribution.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your remarks. And you see, a few days ago, I gave an interview and people were asking me, what is my advice to this government on the way forward? And I said, listen, I am in a dilemma. I used to advise and criticize the Buhari regime because they were stupid. Buhari lacked any intellectual depth. He was basically a moron. So you felt a duty to advise them. How do you advise the criminal? Because this man is criminally intelligent and he has captured the state. I want us to be very clear. We are under state capture. A band of criminals sat down together, devised the abduction of a criminal. And I have to tell you this is the truth of the situation in Nigeria. It is better to be a politician than to be a bank robber. If you rob a bank today, you have to go and rob another one next month when the money you stole is finished. But if you're a politician, you can rob daily for 4 years and rob daily for another 4 years. And so a lot of criminals changed their business model, and instead of risking their lives at the bank in case police might shoot them, they decided to risk their lives at the poll because the risk was lower and the reward was higher. It is kind of the way that Fulani herdsmen discover that trekking up and down with cattle is not as profitable as kidnapping an infidel. And that's why the Fulanis are the biggest, kidnapping franchise in West Africa right now, because it is more profitable. A cow, how long will you take to fatten a cow? But when you kidnap somebody, this same week, you collect ransom. So that's the same principle that the politicians and criminals are applying. And if you look at the top echelon of this so-called government, they are criminals, the top echelon. People who in different jurisdictions have been indicted, suspended, expelled, deported. Those are the people running your country right now. And if you know the level of looting that is going on, that is why the Naira has crashed against the dollar. Because they're buying all the dollars to export their money.
Sorry, we have to pause it for a moment. We have Mr. Okoye. Please, your hand is raised up. Can you give us your thoughts? We have 2 minutes to round up.
Thank you, Pastor Lawrence. And my question is really about the Supreme Court judgment that was delivered. Can justification for that judgment be that the Supreme Court is not just a court that delivered judgment, but legislative sort of making institution also? They sort of look at things not just from the legalese sort of point of view, but look at it in a constitutional sort of wider sort of implication of their decision. Can that be the justification of how that judgment went?
Yeah, you see, so there are a couple of things. There's a general understanding that we say that the law ends at the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court is a policy court. Now, recently I was speaking to a retired Supreme Court judge, and he was of the view that there was a mechanism to fix the Plateau State dilemma, where the Supreme Court ruled one thing on the same set of facts and law and validated the governor, but the Court of Appeal ruled the opposite on the same facts and law and invalidated the National Assembly members. And so his lordship showed me a few examples of actions that could be taken to address it. And I said to my lord, I said, sir, I like the idea you're mooting, but the problem is once we do that, we open the floodgates of litigation. Every politician will come out and insist that the same thing must happen to him. Now, in the last election, there were about 1,700 election petitions filed, just this 2023. And I think it's exceeded the number of petitions filed in 2007, which was 1,400. But can you imagine how overwhelmed the courts will be when things of that nature happen? So there's a policy component to the way decisions are made. And frankly, I do not see any policy component that the Supreme Court made. In fact, their decision basically weakened the Constitution of Nigeria. There's no safeguard anymore in the Constitution of Nigeria on the basis of who can be president. They have watered down and devalued the potency of the Constitution. Now, every criminal, Dick and Harry, with a terrible past can just come and use that judgment as the basis for contesting and not the Constitution.
Thank you so very much, my co-host, Mr. Rampam. I think our time is up, and we have to call it a day. Team Elumba is already standing by to take over.
Mr. Kevin, I'm going to sue you for my 10 minutes that you took in the last segment, which you did not refund to me. It is not fair. Okay, I dash you. I yield.
We temper justice with mercy.
Thank you very much.